Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nothing like 5 verses to keep you going in the morning.
Yeah.
What with long Bible passages and all the rest. I was beginning to think he didn't want me to speak. So today I want to look at the similarities between a certain king, name of David, and our King, Jesus Christ. Just in case any was wondered there, when I said our king, I meant our king. Not the current king sitting in a kingdom somewhere. Now, having said that, the first thing I want us to do is turn to 1 Samuel. We're going to go through one or two little places here. And the first is Samuel 22. 1 Samuel 22. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So there his brothers and all his father's house heard it. They went down there to him. But I want you to listen to this. This is chapter 22, verse 2. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented, gathered to him. So he became captain over them. And there was about 400 men with him. Now, why am I bringing that across? Well, if you have taken note, these are all the people who are not happy with their lot. They are complainers. They are angry with how Saul is ruling the kingdom. They have got themselves financially in difficulties, and they are under pressure. One way or another, they find it difficult to continue alive. And they've made a choice. David's now in the same boat as we are. Let's go join him. Let's see how he deals with this. And 400 of them, that's 400 men, not because they bring their wives and families with them, 400 men actually form his first army. But more will come. More will come. And he becomes a band of renegades. Lovely word, isn't it? But why is this important? Well, if we take a quick glimpse towards Jesus and listen to what the Pharisees are saying about Jesus, what do we discover? He's associating with all of these publicans and layabouts and sinners of all shapes, sizes, and of course, that's exactly what he was doing. Because as he himself said, I've not come for the righteous, but for sinners to repent. And David represents that, because when he has to separate from Saul, because he's been persecuted, because Saul has taken this notion that David is going to be a threat to him. And the sad thing is, David was never a threat to Saul, because David left everything in God's hands. And that was a quite unique situation, because while Saul saw a threat that needed to be destroyed, David didn't. And he couldn't quite get his head around, why do you hit me so much? Now, the reason we're bringing this up now is because David's now got a small army of his own. He could do damage to Saul. In fact, in one place when he is staying with the Philistines, they think he is doing damage, because they think when he goes out to raid, he's raiding Judah and different places along Israel and causing havoc. What they don't know is that he's actually hitting them in different places and very strategically making sure that no one survives in order to be able to tell back the story. So again, we see that David is somebody who is a man of war. But we also have to remember he's a man who God describes as being after his own heart. And that statement to us is a bit of a confusing one. And the reason for it is because we don't necessarily see David and Jesus in the same light. Because when we look at David, we say, okay, this is a guy who, a lot of blood in his hands. He's made a lot of decisions that would be questionable. In fact, I heard on a recent discussion, somebody asked him the question, when David is brought up along with a few of his victims who were righteous, will they be surprised to see him standing there? Will they be onto the explanation from God? What's he doing there? He killed me. He stole my wife. Or he came into our town, he slaughtered everybody, man, woman, and children. Why is he here? This man's covered in blood. So we see there's a lot of things that we could look at and think about. So to say that David reflects God's heart should get us immediately to think, okay, what are we missing about God? What are we not seeing here? Because it's evident that David is a type of Christ all the way through. Have you ever noticed in the New Testament when Jesus meets a spirit-possessed person? Have you ever noticed the spirit? What do you want with us? Have you come to judge us before the time? Have you come to torment us? Have you come to kill us? They're not looking at a meek and mild Jesus Christ. They're looking at someone who will destroy them, who has the power, who has the authority, and who they know will not allow them to remain. So when we look at those things, we need to understand that Jesus has absolutely no mercy to sin. He will root it out. He will destroy it. He will kill it. It will not survive. And that's something that we don't see, because we think, well, David was killing people. David was killing the Lord's enemies. In our reading today, Connie shared a little bit that Jeremiah had highlighted. That those who fight against Israel fight against God, and that God will not allow them to prosper. He will destroy them. He will come against them. He will fight with them. And that's only the ones who don't like Israel. Today, that would be something a lot of people all over the world should be taking note of, but they don't. And they'll wonder why certain problems and difficulties will land in their lap. But it's how you treat Israel that's very, very important. Which brings us back to David. Let's understand what's happened here with David. He does have 400 men who have aligned themselves with him. He's tried to get out of the country and stay out of it, but that has become very difficult. At one point, he has to let on that he's a little crazy, and that works for him for a little while, but he's not going to be able to keep that up because nobody believes it, really. The question is, he also knows that he can't stay in Israel. And the reason he knows that is because when he has been in Israel, people keep telling Saul where he is. I mean, they think he was the king or someone, but he is. That was quite right. And every time David would go and help somebody who was being attacked or oppressed by the Philistines or by other groups, and he would go and support them, guess what happened? They would automatically let Saul know that David was with him. And when David asked God, would they give me up? The answer was always the same. Absolutely. There's no loyalty here. David has no loyalty from the people he's helping. They don't care about him. And when we look at Jesus and we think of all that he did for the people, the healing of the sick, the raising of the dead, the cleansing of lepers, the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000, the calming of seas, all these magnificent miracles done over a 3.5-year period. At the end of the day, they don't care about him because they don't associate who he was. They didn't get it. And David was in the same boat. They don't recognize him as the anointed king because he's anointed, he's not yet in power. Saul is still king. Saul is still king. Why did I repeat that? Because we need to understand there are times when we are a little misled in believing that Jesus Christ is our king, which I said he was, he is, and that he's ruling over this earth now. That's the mistake. Jesus Christ is not ruling this earth now. Like David, there's another king who has authority, who has power, and he hasn't been removed yet. And until that king is removed, our true king cannot take authority. So David's in that boat. This is where we see him as he's going through the wilderness years, shall we call it. Because David is aware that God has anointed Saul as king over Israel. And Saul has raised an army and come after him. Everywhere he hears he is, he brings soldiers to try and catch him, to kill him. That's how it is. Therefore, when we look upon this, we discover that Saul has just heard that Jesus is in the wilderness of Ziph, Z-I-P-H. Saul's thought every day to catch him, but God wouldn't deliver him into his hand. So, at one point, in one of these campaigns, Saul and his entire army decide to camp. But Saul feels an urgent need for a little privacy. So he goes to a nearby cave. And he goes into that nearby cave. When he's there doing what kings do in privacy, he's unaware of the fact that David and quite a few of his men are at the back of the cave. Totally unaware of it. And the king settles down to do what he is doing. The servants of David said to him, or the men with him if you like, God has just delivered this man, your enemy, into your hand. What you need to do is take the advantage God has given you and strike. David's tempted. He's tempted for two reasons. One, Saul has killed the entire family of a group of priests. All of them dead except for one son who's now with David and was able to report it back. And David feels very responsible for that because he had asked the priest if the priest could give him anything to eat and if there was any weapons that he could have. And the priest had said, well, the only bread I have is the showbread. We've just changed it, so the old showbread's here. I could give that to you, provided you can guarantee to me that none of the people with you have sin or are unclean. Oh, David said, we don't do, none of that ever happens when we're going out in campaign. So he gets the showbread. He said, any weapons? Yes, there's weapons. The only weapon we've got, though, is the sword that you got at Goliath. Perfect, I'll take it. So David's sitting here. He's led the priest to believe that he's on an urgent mission for Saul the king. The priest got no reason to disagree with this. He knows this is David. He's the commander of Saul's armies. What's the problem? Until Saul hears about it. And Saul's reaction is, you conspired against me and he executes the whole lot of them. He didn't consider who they were and that they were God's servants. He just took it personally and caused the bother. So that's going through David's head as he's standing there with the opportunity to take vengeance. And he goes forward and he cuts the corner of Saul's robe. Just a little cut. But immediately he does so, he begins to become very troubled by his conscience. And he has to tell his people, look, we're not harming him. Let him go. Why? This is considered to be one of the bloodiest warriors mentioned in the Bible. David is covered in blood. He was of such a nature with regard to war that God said, I'm sorry, you cannot build me a house. The reason? You're too covered in blood. You are too violent a man. So understand David is a violent man. He understands war. He understands how to fight. And he understands you do not give way to your enemy. Yet here we are in a cave, perfect opportunity. He said, no, I can't touch Saul. And the reason I can't touch Saul is because God anointed him. It's up to God as to how he will live or die. If God wishes to take him out, he will do so. And he will do it in any which way he wants, either through his health, through an accident, through war, whichever way he wants. But no person can be guiltless if they kill the Lord's anointed. Now, when we hear that, we think, well, that showed real loyalty. But not to Saul. David's aware Saul hates him. If Saul was not the Lord's anointed, he'd be dead. But David knows God. And because David knows God, he is refusing to do anything that would put him on the wrong side of God. Because he knows his life is dependent on God and everything he does. Jesus was also the Lord's anointed. He's the Messiah. He's the Christ. That's what it means, the anointed one. Yet the Jewish leaders, having tested him for 3.5 years and had the evidence to show that he was from God, chose to execute him. They chose that it would be better for him to die than for the whole people to be subject to destruction. They didn't consider the fact that the moment they made that decision, they sentenced the entire nation to destruction. Because that's how God works. And we know that within 40 years, the temple was destroyed. And within a 70-year period, approximately, the whole nation was disbanded. And you wouldn't have found anyone Jewish in or around that area because they were all moved. Completely, totally. Because God does not take things lightly when his anointed is touched. Which is why we keep reminding people that, Israel is also anointed for a purpose and therefore can't be touched. So we need to be careful how we approach it, how we talk about it, and what we think about it. Because God's listening. David didn't just get one attempt at Saul's life, he got 2. The second attempt was even more fun. Saul and his entire army were happily camping out in the wilderness again. And David was nearby. And he could see them from the hills. And he says to one of his servants, who'll come with me? And the servant says, I'll go. No bother. And David and this servant walk into the camp, Saul's camp, with thousands of soldiers, all trained and all with one job, kill David. He goes in. He goes up to where the king is sleeping. He pulls up the king's spear, takes it with him, and the jar of water at his head, and leaves again. But before he leaves, he has a great problem persuading his servant, no, you are not to kill Saul. But listen, I can take his own spear, I can put it straight through his head. I'll only need one thrust. Only once. And it's done. But no. And David has to lay out this whole argument again. No, you can't do that because he's the Lord's anointed. You can't kill him. You can't touch him. It's up to God how he dies. And he persuades them. He tells them, let's go. Let's move. So they take the spear and the water thing and they head off up a wee bit away from the army. And there in the middle of the early dawn light, a voice starts shouting, Abner! Abner! Who's that? You're some man, aren't you? Sleeping there. And the enemies of your king can arrive down and lift his spear. And they go on. And Saul's listening to this. And he's aware of what's going on. And David said, you should have been killed, Abner, because of what you allowed. And Saul said, David, is that you? He said, yes. My lord, the king, your servant is here. And I've taken your spear and your water pot. So if you send a young man over, they can collect them. And so they did. And then the king went back home again. All these times, Saul has had witness after witness that David does not intend him harm. All these times. He knows that David's not the threat. His threat comes from a higher source, God. And it's interesting that at this point, David is now forced to leave Israel and go and live among the Philistines. And he does. And that's when we see many of his attacks and what he does and how he approaches this. But here's an interesting aspect. The Philistines are Gentiles. And Jesus also ended up having to take the gospel message, the truth, all about God, and send it through his apostles into the Gentiles. Because Israel would not hear it. The Jews would not accept it. It became an affront to them. So God hardened their hearts and wouldn't let them. And so you have what they call the time of the Gentiles. But it's only to remain until the Jews are returned back to power, to Israel is back in as a nation. Oh yeah, that happened a while back, didn't it? From our perspective, that happened 80 years ago. Well, approximately 78. But you know, one of the things that we often miss, just something that we don't get, is that God never stopped hating Saul. How do you know he hated him? He wouldn't talk to him. He isolated him. He wouldn't go near him. No matter what Saul did, no matter how he approached it, God refused to acknowledge him. You might wonder, well, why was that? Because Saul did not obey God. And then God rejected him. And once rejected, there was no coming back. Instead of the Holy Spirit being with him to inspire, help, and guide him, he got another spirit. And it troubled him greatly and caused him great difficulties. His mental health was severely in the balance when that spirit hit. And we've saw that too many times. He tried to kill his son. He tried to kill David a number of times with a spear when he was playing an instrument to help Susan. All of these things. And yet here was this king, head and shoulders over the rest of the people, declared as glorious. I mean, he was a majestic man. And yet we don't think, who does Saul remind you of? Well, in the Bible there's a story. It's a story about an angelic being called Lucifer. And this Lucifer was perfect. He was the Z of God, the best that could be made, so to speak. No iniquity or problems or difficulties or anything at all was wrong with him. Everything was perfect until iniquity was found in him. In other words, he let it in. He chose it. And the moment he chose it, he was rejected by God. And because he was rejected by God, we look upon him as being the enemy of God. Now, there's different things we can say about him. Most Christians say this is the devil. This is the adversary. This is Satan. Some say it's not. Either way, Saul was his prototype. Perfect in everything, put in a position of power and rulership, but would not listen or obey God. And you know, when Jesus returns, the king of this world, the God of this world, will be taken. He will be put into chains. And it's exactly the same person that we're talking about. Because he is the king of this world. He was given authority and power over it. Unlike Saul, though, who was truthfully given it, he stole it. That was his iniquity. He stole it by deceiving mankind and causing them to die. It's little things like that that we have to notice when we go through these things. We have to look at the links. When you look at the description of Saul, it's absolutely clear that he is so different from everybody else around him. So different. Head and shoulders above everybody else. Strong, powerful, elegant, can speak well, knows what he's doing. A good diplomat. But not willing to obey God. Not willing to do what is right. So was rejected. And what happens? The only friend he ever had, the only one he could totally rely on, was Samuel. And Samuel hadn't spoken to him in years. Because Samuel had said, the Lord's rejected you and I can't come near you anymore. And when Samuel was talking to God, when God told Samuel to go and anoint David as his replacement, Samuel highlighted, look, Saul finds out about this, he'll come and kill me too. So even though Saul held Samuel in the highest possible regard, we need to understand this man had become so corrupt, it wouldn't have mattered to him who it was. His problem was with God, and he hated God. So what's he do? He breaks every rule in the book. He tells his people, go find me a medium. Tricky one that. You give orders earlier in your reign that the world to be removed from the kingdom on point of death. So, tricky to do that. But there is one. She's an Endor. She's known as a witch. She's a medium. She can talk to the dead. You know, Saul's immediate reaction here should have been, well, why wasn't she put to death? Who let her live? But no, it wasn't. It was, let's go see her. I need to talk to Samuel. I need to talk to Samuel. So he goes, the lady's introduced to him. He doesn't know, or she doesn't know who he is. But guess what she does know? She knows that he's in trouble. She's a very kind-hearted woman. You get that from as you read the story. She's somebody you would have liked. She's somebody that you would have got on well with. She's a lovely, kind-hearted, thoughtful person. She just has this little peculiarity, which means that she should be dead. Just a little thing. See, we have trouble with that because we look at the person. We don't look at the problem. This woman has an infection that, if it's not dealt with, will spread throughout an entire world. And it did. Today, the belief in the immortal soul is the most widespread belief anywhere. Scary, isn't it? And yet it's all a lie. It totally denies everything the Bible says. Yet this witch worked on that principle. That when a person dies, their spirit, their consciousness, their awareness is still alive, but in the grave. And they can be brought up. And you can speak to them. And they know all that's happening around them, which is contrary to everything the Bible tells you. Now, we understand that the fact that she could do this so efficiently is because she was linked with an evil spirit. And that evil spirit is called a familiar. The word familiar speaks for itself. It means friendly spirit or family spirit. But here's the problem. A friendly or family spirit also can be related to one who can mimic who you're looking for because it knows them. It spent time with them. So, I want you to think about this. When this witch begins doing what she does, something happens that she's not expecting. And her response is terror. So what changed? What happened? Samuel was brought up. It wasn't the familiar spirit. Samuel was brought up. A total impossibility. But then nothing's impossible to God. And God had said, right, he wants to know something, I'll tell him something. And suddenly Samuel is there. Robed, covered, the way Saul would have known about him. And she says, this is who I'm seeing. This is the one I'm seeing. This one really shouldn't be here. And then she says, and you're the king of Israel. You're Saul. Suddenly everything's made known to her. Nothing's hidden. And he says, no, you'll live, you'll be okay. But what does he say? So she tells him what Samuel says. And believe me, that was not a message you would want to give to Saul. Because the message was simple. This day tomorrow, this time tomorrow, you'll be with me along with your sons, all here. Your time is over. You've disobeyed God too many times. Now, God is determined that you die. Your life is spent. It's over. End of story. The vision was gone. The king fainted. Well, he would. But he fainted because he had no food, he had nothing to drink, he had been like that for thing. He was reluctant, but this is where the woman's kindness shows through. She actually takes time and makes a large meal for him. She needs bread, she kills a calf, she cooks the whole thing, she feeds them before they go out into the night. In other words, even though she knows that her life is on the line and that she's dealing with a king that wants her and her type dead, she's still willing to feed him. She's still willing to show mercy to the man she sees in distress right there at that time. Not often do you hear nice things about the Witch of Endor, is it? But it's worth remembering. Because when we look at the world, we see people like that all the time. And we think, God would look upon that kindness. But God's already judged. Why? He can't. Because sin cannot be allowed to flourish. It must be stamped out. No matter who it is or what it is. Sin must be brought to an end. And with Saul's death, you'd think everything should go well for David now. But it's never that easy. Yes, he's made king of the Jews. And he goes up to Hebron. But Israel hasn't accepted him as king yet. But when he hears that Saul's dead, he listens to the story he's told. Now, it's not the exact true story of what happened, but an Amalekite comes and tells David, here's the king's crown, here's his armband, here's all the things that you need to rule. The king himself was dying. He was cornered by his enemies, and he asked me to slay him, so I did him a favor. I knew he would die, so I helped him along. He mistakenly thought that David would have been okay with this. He hadn't been with David, so he didn't know. So David's order was, take him, execute him. The charge is from his own mouth. He killed the Lord's anointed. See, even there, David is still thinking of God's righteousness and refusing to let the one who did the murder, as he understood it to be, die. Now, the man didn't do the murder, because the Bible tells us when Saul's servant, armor bearer, had refused to kill him as he had instructed him, Saul lifted his own sword and fell on it. And the armor bearer, when he saw that Saul was dead, took his own sword and he fell on it. And that's how they had died. So no one had been guilty except the one who chose to end his own life. Why do we keep talking about David and Jesus intermingling between the two? Because this next stage of Jesus's or David's life is the bit that reflects closest to what we've seen with Jesus' life. It's a very simple part. Jesus is acknowledged as king, but he hasn't got his kingdom yet. David has been acknowledged and accepted by the Jews as king, but Israel hasn't accepted him yet. And it'll be a wee while before that happens. And to be honest, from our point of view, 2,000 years is quite a while. But it's nearly over. Our king is coming soon. Our enemy will be removed completely and will not trouble us anymore. But we need to understand Satan stands, or rather sits on that throne at the moment, and he makes decisions. But unlike Saul, who was God's anointed, Satan was never anointed by God. He is the enemy, and he is to be fought with all your might. And when you see anything that belongs to him, sickness, disease, pestilence, death, You're to rescue the person suffering it. That's your responsibility. You're that small band who have associated with Jesus Christ, a band of volunteers who are with him at all times. Let's remain steadfast in our service to Christ. Thank you.